Hey, and welcome back to the Creative Odyssey podcast. And this time I'm here with Noah Schaul. Um, and Noah, how are you?
I'm doing great today. I'm almost ready for Christmas, so
Yeah,
really good.
likewise. And from where are you recording right now?
Yeah, thanks for inviting. And I'm calling in from Barcelona now. So I'm originally from Luxembourg, but living in Spain at the moment.
So, how did you get into? Tell me a bit about yourself. So, how do you get into the situation where you are right now?
Well, geographically, I could say that I grew up in Luxembourg. It's a country I love and cherish. Lots of friends and family there that I also like to visit a lot. But then I also really had this adventurous side of me, which led me to study in the Netherlands, started working in the Netherlands as well, did some traveling in between. And then after a few years, I decided that I wanted to keep my job that I have and had in the Netherlands, but take it to Spain. So I do mostly remote work from Barcelona, and you could say I'm a bit the expat of the company, working from here. That's my current life situation in that sense, if, in terms of where I'm based.
Yeah, and the background of the job itself. So tell us a bit about what is it, what you're doing, what are you are passionate about?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I've been from the get go, really from already from my parents and childhood, always surrounded by nature, by good people, and or by a certain kind of pioneering towards sustainability. I mean, my parents, they were the first ones in Luxembourg to put solar panels on their roof, or among the
Mm.
first ones, and stuff like that. So it was always a topic close to me. Um, from a family of artists and social workers, I would say, I then decided to swim against the stream and start with economics and business at
Mm.
university. But then that very quickly also turned into a focus on sustainable business, basically. So that's what I then specialized in and had some projects in that. And then well, especially with In Change, the company I work for, until today, I was able to really focus on the circular economy and sustainable business, and especially training around that at universities and business schools and companies as my passion and my focus. And that's what I did until today. But with the last 2 to 3 years, I was also able to really dive into the world of, let's say, rethinking business models and trying to really move from being a startup with things being a bit unclear still all over the place towards more
Yeah.
a scale up, and how can we really grow that business. That's in a nutshell my journey.
Yeah. And grow and scale in a sustainable way and not for growing sake.
Yes,
Oh,
correct.
yeah.
So definitely, I've always been very focused on our circular and sustainable products. The last 2 years were also very much focused on supply chain management, which is a very exciting field as well.
Mm.
Somewhat less close to home. I'm more at home in the sustainable business space, but understanding supply chains and especially how they work today is also crucial to think about how to change them, and where the problems are and where things can be improved.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the last 2 years were, let's say, more focused on business, revamping the business. And my long term hope is that the growth we experience in supply chain management and working with actually lots of very big companies, you can think the common fast moving consumer good companies like I don't know, that make our laptops, food, and drinks.
Mm.
Those are the typical customers, that working with them on supply chain management topics, that in the long term, when they are looking more and more at sustainability, that we can help them also transition towards
Yeah.
better practices on that side. So that's a bit the long term vision personally there.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. And I don't know how much you can share, but what was your last exciting project?
Oh, that's a good one. I think the one that comes to mind first is that actually it kind of accumulated just today. We just got the feedback from one of our customers. It's a large very large organization, more than 100,000 employees.
Mm.
They make things like toothpaste and toothbrushes and other personal care products with
Mm.
employees all around the world. And we've been over the last 2 years really talking to them and really innovating our product. So to make a very long story short, we've been doing, let's say, classical workshops for the last 15 years
Yeah.
using a business simulation game. A business game, for those who are not familiar with it, it's like flight simulators that pilots use to learn to fly a plane, but then for businesses, so like a business simulator.
Yeah.
And we've been using that in workshops, kind of that we are all familiar with. But now we've tried to change and innovate our product to be more scalable and to reach more people, because a workshop usually has like 12 to 30, 40 people if you're lucky. So
Yeah.
that doesn't help you much if you work with an organization of 100,000 employees or more. So we've been working hard to innovate that product and create really more scalable products while keeping this engaging, simulating, gamified team learning element alive. And that worked apparently, because today, after 2 years of work, two pilots, and scaling it to the first cohort of 40 people, we got the feedback, and the feedback is extremely positive, and people love the business simulation game, um, and they want more. So that was
Mm.
a great success story, which brings together, especially this let's say, the rethinking business and product side of things.
Yeah, that's always a good feeling if you get positive and useful feedback, and not just a whole praise. But I'm really glad that you're changing a bit about the practices. And I think, as I just maybe a bit more recently got into sustainability, as in not something that is like moralistic. That's the way I've seen it before, years before, that there's like the normal way, and this is just
Hmm.
like common sense. You just do it the regular way, or doing it like the organic, sustainable way, which is usually by itself just uncool because it's just a eco vibe. And I don't know, you're probably familiar with like German, and it's pr- probably similar in like in the Netherlands and in Luxembourg, where you have
Yeah,
like these eco moms wearing their Birkenstocks, and now they're cool, but they did not used to be cool.
it took
And
them a while, right? I think
yeah,
it took them until Louis Vuitton bought them, until they
yeah,
became cool
I
enough.
think they bought them at the peak of this being
Yeah,
mainstream. But you can see
yeah,
the transition, that something that used to be uncool, like sustainability or Birkenstocks, is now like expected mainstream. And that time I really uh, got a bit into like sustainable business models, and not using like the regular business model navigator, but using the sustainable business model
mm,
navigator. And you see that there's really just one thing that you need to change about the idea that makes a huge difference. Like you're probably familiar with the razor and blade kind of business model, which is usually creating a lot more waste than needed, because of
yeah,
cartridges instead of just using the metal blade. But you
yeah. So
can,
you buy the
yeah,
whole thing every time again, and you throw it away every time instead of just using
yeah,
the blade. Yeah, indeed.
yeah, exactly. But there's another example where they're using basically the same model, but switch out maybe the idea of a toothbrush, where you
Hmm.
throwing away the whole handle all the time, but then you could really just replace the brush part of it. It is not that
Yeah,
it's really established, but the idea itself is like reducing waste and not introducing more waste. And these are so common sense that I think the sustainable way should be the common sense way and not the other way around. So like,
yeah, and
yeah.
you're hitting on a key point there. I think I've been now working in sustainability for 7 years. I've come across many ideas and models. My parents were definitely
Mm,
among the ones that also had these chain exchangeable um, toothbrush heads at
Mm.
home at some point. And I think that's really the key one, is that you have to make it in a certain way click with people,
Yeah.
understanding consumers and what makes them tick, and incentives. Unfortunately, is in the end what drives behavior change. Because what we've seen that the many of the ways that we've tried to engage people through awareness and whatnot have simply not worked. I mean,
Yes.
there was a big boom for, let's say, at a political level, it's the same big boom for green parties across Europe,
Mm.
and then suddenly that burst again when a different topic became again more top of mind. So I think that's it needs to make common sense, and the same counts for companies, right? Like
Yeah.
being nowadays a sustainability director is really tough. You are in between lots of constraints. You have to negotiate with many people and stakeholders.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important that you nowadays you really understand other people's perspective, speaking about other departments and what their struggles are, because they have all kinds of concerns, and sustainability unfortunately isn't always top of their mind.
Mm.
So how can you make it visible for them, speak their language, and make it put it into their business perspective that they understand it? I think that's
Yeah.
a key skill nowadays, and it's not easy. And of course, hopefully that will change more and more with consumer behavior changes, and also companies stepping up more and more in terms of how they culturally look at their role and ambition,
Mm.
which is coming up more and more for, let's say, non-listed companies. For those who are listed on the stock market, it's very difficult because they are always, of course, following shareholder
Yeah.
objectives, which are quite often very financially and narrow-minded driven. So that's yeah, that's a long reaction to your comment about
Yeah.
that things need to make a common sense.
But yeah, just like you said, common sense. It makes common sense, and it is a complex topic. And I would harshly put it that like the shareholder value and like the it's like profit oriented when it comes to the business side, and the consumer side is basically convenience and price. So it's all about the money in the end. But um, if you want to kind of establish change, it shouldn't feel like a total change, but it should click and be something that is so obvious to do. And there are some examples that worked, and sometimes you need like the regulations from maybe the whole European Union, like switching all to USB-C on all devices, and it's really a complex topic. That's why it's can probably not only be done by the companies, but I think, as you said, why the supply chains matter is you could optimize the supply chain and not change really much about a product, and the people are not they're not needed to give up their convenience because nothing changes what they receive, but in the backlash is much more sustainable, as in, for example, the sourcing of cocoa beans or whatever. The supply chain is famously uh, hard and unfair for
Hmm.
the ones who are growing it. And there are initiatives that came up and like branded that the supply chain is much fairer for everyone who's like involved, and not the last few who make the most profit. And I think that's a positive change, that optimizing
Yeah,
the supply chain
yeah,
even. Yeah.
I fully agree. And I mean, cocoa beans is a funny example because I spoke about about my work and the simulations that we have there, the business games. And
Yeah.
what the sustainable transformation one is about the case of cocoa beans. So
Yeah.
we basically simulate there the whole supply chain there. And you're right. I mean, the main problems that companies have there nowadays is that or the whole industry has, is that they quite often they source their cocoa beans from the spot market, which means that they don't. It's like an anonymous market, which
Yeah.
bundles different sources from different places, and you can't. There's no traceability anymore, so you don't know anymore
Yeah.
where does my original produce come from. which then means that you can't promise anything to your customer other than it's probably very unsustainable and very unethical.
Yeah.
But there now, as you say, in Europe, there's now legislation coming that you, as of a certain size, company size, you must. I'm unfortunately not able to quote which legislation and by when
Mm.
and all that. I would have to look it up. Maybe we can drop something in the comments for the listeners later. But
Yep.
that they must know, and that's, I mean, of course, it's a push, right? It's legislation. It would be better if companies do so organically. But
Mm.
this is like, of course, a huge pain for companies. But to a certain extent, it makes complete sense, right? You're making a product that is used by hundreds of thousands of people. So don't you have a certain responsibility to know where it's from? Is it sourced in a toxic way? Is it sourced in a human way? Is it sourced in an ethical and sustainable way, right? I mean, these are also, to a certain extent, it also just is a certain normal step in our evolution of
Yeah.
our economy. And that will be a huge change for companies, and that will create huge transparency, which, then as a consequence enables consumers, but also other stakeholders to monitor and to hold companies accountable, and to also, for companies themselves and their employees to realize what is happening in the supply chain, because it's very easy. You don't see something, you don't think about it.
Mm.
Out of mind, out of mind, out of sight, out of mind, right?
Exactly.
um, so I'm not always a big fan of the way that legislation is done. It can complicate things a lot, but sometimes it also creates very good dynamics, which I think in this case, to a large extent, is true.
Yeah. And also, if like your whole supply chain is traceable and even visible, there's still a chance to optimize it later on. There's always ways to not, I wouldn't say cut costs, but to optimize them. Maybe there's a better route you can take or whatever. I'm really not into logistics and stuff like that,
Yeah,
but there's probably ways to then optimize the costs and not to have like a anonymous pile and just to pull it from. I mean, personally, as a person, you would usually be like curious enough to know where it's from, but uh, as you get into like a corporate, maybe it doesn't matter. I'm if I'm going to grow, not to grow, but if I were to go to sell like chocolate, I would know where it's coming from.
yeah.
Like, isn't it common sense? And for some people, it isn't, and that's kind of shocking sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, of course, in the end, it comes back again to the convenience for companies again, and
Yeah,
the price there, right? So it's much easier, quicker, and cheaper to just
yeah,
source from the spot market, because there's always availability. There's always
yeah,
maybe not the best quality, but enough quality for a certain type of product range.
yeah,
Which brings us back to the point that you mentioned, right? Convenience. And I think, I mean, there again, we could speak a lot about this, but we are in a convenience economy, as people sometimes call it. And I
yeah,
think also we as consumers, we sometimes don't realize how far we are taking this, right? I mean, we nowadays, our expectations are that a product needs to arrive the next day. And if it's already more than 1 or 2 days delivery, it's already very slow. And
yeah,
no, that's bad. But do I really need my coffee mug with a nice design by 1 or 2 days delivery? Of course I don't, right? So we've
yeah,
created this fake urgency in our
yeah.
society for,
Mm,
for convenience, and that's creating much more repercussions than we actually think, right? I mean, if you have somewhat more lead time as in business, if we speak about logistics,
yeah,
you can, as you say, you can optimize way more. You can fill one truck with two loads rather than
mm,
or with a you can fill one truck with a full load rather than sending two trucks with half a load, because they have to go out quicker. So if you had to wait
mm,
for the full load for one truck, you would be late, and then consumers would complain potentially, or you wouldn't meet your service level. So this,
yeah,
I also see this to a certain extent. I mean, that's where I think the awareness can really help, because when somebody told this to me, I was like, yeah, true. We are really creating a certain need that we don't really have, if we are honest with
Yeah.
ourselves, and that creates problems on its own. How do you solve this? I'm not 100% sure, but I think there, speaking about creativity, I think companies can become much more creative, right? If you look
Yep.
at Amazon, I mean, they could easily give you an option that is the 1 day delivery, which is like okay, you get that for free with Amazon Prime or whatever, or you get an
Mm.
option to have a slower delivery and be aware of how much carbon footprint that saves, or you get
Yep.
bonus points for that, or whatever, right? So a certain incentive system. So I sometimes
Mm.
feel like companies are really seeing this from they are forgetting this creative side of sustainability and how you can actually engage your consumers with it. And I think many consumers would react quite positively to it,
Yeah.
which is a point on its own. But yeah, I think that's a nice one to link it also a bit back to the topic of today in that sense and to reconcile both.
I think you're definitely right. It should be not. I mean, it should be common sense that you're able to choose a more sustainable option when it comes to like shipping and or even the sourcing. But on let's just take the same base level product, and it would make a massive change if all deliveries were more sustainable. And if you really make it more fun instead of it feeling like a downgrade. I mean, like the 1 day delivery feels like the premium, like it's better automatically because it's faster, and the
Right.
other version feels worse.
Yeah.
It's automatically you get like the
Yeah.
prime. It even says it. It's the prime delivery, and the
Yeah.
other
Yeah.
is just the regular peasant
Yeah.
version of a
Yeah.
delivery,
Yeah, it's right. I think that's a
the
good
poor
point. You can,
people's delivery who can't
yeah,
who don't like to spend like a whole subscription, which is in itself it works for them, but it's kind of weird. You have no other shop or retailer where you would pay a subscription for faster delivery.
yeah.
I couldn't
I
imagine
can't
one.
think of one so quickly. Yeah, yeah.
No.
Well, even though subscriptions are of course becoming more and
Yeah.
more common,
Yeah.
and in the end, convenience I think is really the main driver there.
Yeah.
Another good example of a company I actually think is quite a nice example of how they do it because
Mm.
they manage to turn this around, this downgrade towards an upgrade, and that's in this case it's the example of not owning a product, which is usually a
Mm.
downgrade, right? If you, well, I can't afford a car, so I have to whenever I need one, well, I need to go through the whole process of renting one and all that.
Yeah.
Same in this case for bikes. So the example, I don't know if you know them, swap feeds, the bikes with
Yeah.
the
I
blue
know
wheel
them
in the front.
actually. Yeah.
Huge success story across Europe, where they made it more fun to not own the bike
Mm.
and pay a subscription for that. And whenever there's an issue with it, you bring it to the shop or they actually pick it up if it's a big problem and you get a
Yep.
new one and you can just continue driving. So you are paying a subscription not to own a bike, but for the service of biking, you could say, right?
Mm.
And that's really, really amazing because they were able to change this paradigm in that sense.
Yeah.
And they then also managed to link it to a huge amount of circular and sustainable business
Yeah.
practices that are simply not possible if you are
Yeah.
simply selling a product and you don't know what the user is doing with it. Because in this case, you
No.
are constantly in touch with your products, which creates complexity and problems, of course, but it also creates huge potential for really optimizing and improving
Yeah.
and being much more data
Even
driven and all that. So
yeah.
it's very
Even
interesting.
the spare parts. This is such a good example. They have like I don't know how many, but they have just a few models they kind of provide regularly, right? And so they have like a stock and like plannable for their spare parts. It's not like, oh, your model doesn't exist anymore, so we can't really fix it, but they have like a whole system of what really
Yeah.
works. And I
Yeah.
think that's really the cool part. And I like this example because they make it like a viable option to not own a bike. For
Right.
cars, it's a bigger thing, I think, because a car is a much more financial like risk or um, thing within itself. But even for bikes, they make it really like an option and not something that is like a hassle and be it there is already like classical or typical bike renting where you rent it for a day, and it's not really um that you have it and you can lock it and use it and really use it and break it and don't fear it being used. And it's coming from the Netherlands. They're a huge bike country anyway, so it makes
Yeah,
sense.
true.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's true, but I think it's also not easy to succeed with such a disruptive model in the Netherlands, right? I mean, it's people are proud of their bikes and all that, so it's
Yeah.
quite a feat to achieve this, and it's also, I mean, you see now you saw the last years also this whole sharing model of bikes and rollers and motorbikes and even
Yeah.
cars, which you saw also there. It was really negatively in the news for a while when it comes to sustainability, rightfully so for a while, because there was this boom of many companies entering the market with huge investments and capital and huge risk, because then in the
Yeah.
end lots of them failed, only the a few names survived, and that led to wow, and, I mean, you see these photos nowadays of the piles of bikes or motorbikes or whatever rollers piled up
Mm.
on a landfill, which is of course a huge shame. But long term, you now have these number of players who figured it out and who survived. And I mean, if I look now at big cities and I look at the how really well this works with motorbikes standing around that you can use around the clock, and at an okay price. Same nowadays for cars. It that's really a direction I think that we should go as a society, especially in cities, right, where it makes so much sense to share these assets,
Yeah.
because in the end it makes sense for you as a user. It makes sense for the environment because there's much less production and need for creating these assets, and in the end it makes sense for the companies, because if you look at the kilometers that are shown on the motorbikes, if you take one in the city and you calculate how much they charge you per kilometer or per minute or whatever, you can very quickly make a calculation that it's an amazing business case, right? Like you probably make good money with those services in the long term. I know
Yeah.
that many of these companies also had some years not making a profit, but once you are established, once you have your operations smoothened out, I think it's in a fantastic business model. So that's I think really where the future needs to go. Where if you are opening in your company, think along these lines and don't think just how can I make a profit.
Yeah. So it makes total sense to think more from like a ecosystem perspective and not like creating product and selling product kind of
Yeah.
business. You make really sure to like how is this established in their everyday lives and how is it used. And I think the sharing model works, and it has its downsides sometimes when it comes to like individual flexibility. But I think there's definitely room for improvement. The more people are getting used to it, and maybe in some cities and especially bigger cities, um, it could become common sense and like the main thing to do, especially if you have like a whole like public transport system laid out with all kinds of different vehicles, and you could use a train or a bus or whatever. So there's so many things to choose from to kind of fill the gap. And I think that makes sense to think more in like systems instead of just providing a thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think there are many good examples for this. And if I speak, I mentioned, if you start a new company, and that's also what I don't know if know the Dutch historian Rutger Bregman, I think is his name, who I really, one point that he made that really resonated with me was that we have this whole new generation now coming onto the labor market, right? And with young energy and new ideas and whatnot. And he says that there are so many bright people that are going into the labor market and they just do like random jobs and they are really again like very financially driven. And of course, you know that it's a simplification, right? I mean, there are many people who, you know, their main concern is, you know, feeding themselves and their family. I'm not speaking about them, right? I'm speaking, let's say, more in the communities where, you know, you have a certain, you know, financial stability maybe from home already, so you're not going in there with 100% risk. You know,
Yeah,
there are so many people. Why do so many people not have the ambition to actually do something really meaningful and really that is being part of the solution rather than being part of the problem?
yeah,
And that's really stuck me, and I think that there are really lots of people who should open their mind to that, not necessarily for the environment, nor for helping other people necessarily, or for because I or this historian or whatever whoever says it, but for them, because in the end we see burnout increasing, we see frustration in job increasing, we see people being less motivated to work for work. I mean, all these trends are really becoming more and more prominent. And
yeah,
I think that's also part of the equation, right? So people, I think, would really do themselves a huge favor if they choose something that they, at the end of the day, they feel, okay, I've contributed to something here that is helping the people around me, or people on the other side of the world, or the environment, or my local community, or whatnot. It can really change lives, and I feel like we are sometimes missing this point in the way that we educate people and the way that people look at jobs and ambition. Yeah.
you're making a good point towards like the purpose of your own career, of your own path.
Mhm.
What role does purpose play in your personal and work life?
For me, it always played a very big role. I think when I started off, I knew I want to go for a company that is going into the direction of working on climate solutions in some way or another. That's what attracted me towards In Change, because we had these circular business game and sustainable business games. So really, you know, on the one hand, teaching people about better environmental business practices, at the same
Yeah.
time teaching it to them not in a, let's say, dogmatic way, but in a very playful learning by doing and learning in teams and social learning way, right? So if we were now in a team with two other people, each of us would bring our own skill sets and we would all contribute to each other learning, plus the experience in the business simulation game. So that was from the beginning very, very important for me. And you know, I think that many people have this,
Yeah.
but also many people are rightfully scared. And I think it's normal to be scared, especially in the beginning, you know, of not finding a job or not finding the right job or not making enough money. And also, you're always comparing as a human yourself with
Mm.
others. So I think many people end up somewhere, and that's what I've noted as well. You very easily content yourself with where you are and you get used to it, and
Yeah.
you get a certain narrower view on your life and your job, right? Which is, I think,
Mm.
again, very natural. So again, speaking about skills, I think a very important skill nowadays is the skill of reflecting, and that's what I think I always try to keep very strong for myself, is reflecting of about where am I at right now in my life, in my job, and is that what where I want to be and want to go, and is that true? Am I true to myself and to my purpose? Which has led me to very good conversations with my boss and to very good decisions at work, and you know, being on the right path for yourself, so to say.
Yeah.
And it actually more recently it also made me decide that. So actually, the conversation with you is very timely in that sense. Made me
Mm.
decide that I want to look for new opportunities as well. So you know, we've we've done a certain rethinking of our company, which was super exciting. I've worked for 7 years in circular and sustainability education. And now the focus is more and more on supply chain management and building that
Yeah.
proposition, which we have put in place, which was amazing. But now I feel like, okay, I'm reflecting. I love the journey we've done. I love the company. But for me personally, value wise and purpose wise, well, not value wise, but let's say more purpose wise, I I see that drifting a bit further away again. And if I don't reflect about this, it's very easy to just stay in your job, in your practices and in your habits and keep on going. So for me, it's extremely important. It's not easy to keep thinking about it and reflecting about it. But I now notice that I'm very grateful for that I did that, and that I also stayed true to myself and said, guys, I love the journey until now, but slowly but surely, I think I will start looking at other opportunities out there, because it's an exciting world with lots of opportunities. And
Yeah.
if you have the option, I think it's you're doing yourself a disfavor. I'm not sure that's the right word, but you're not
Yeah.
doing yourself a favor if you don't follow your purpose.
Yeah, and it's so closely tied to like your gut feeling of it being right, and you're so spot on with like the reflection, because your view in like if you're trying to function, your like creativity and your wisdom gets a bit narrower because you need to be more practical, when you need to have like a rhythm where you keep in mind that whatever you could be doing right now could be not you in the next future, and you can always reinvent yourself. And so often people think, now I'm established in this, and now it's working, and it is good, and it maybe pays good, and I don't want to
Mm.
risk it. But if they were truly like in their gut feeling, and not only like the arguments that it makes sense to not change, but there is something you cannot explain, and it just feels like it. And how much do you rely on your intuition when it comes to like making such decisions?
It's a great question. I think if we speak about a creative odyssey of each one of us, right, then the big problem I see with many people is that they rely way too much on arguments and rational thinking. Creativity sits to some extent in your brain, to a large extent, I think, but to a very large extent also it sits subconsciously, it sits into intuition, in your gut feeling, in your passion, in what drives your energy, right? Like if I'm
Yeah,
working on
yeah,
something where I have a gut feeling of, this is not the right direction, or it's not I enjoy, I have little energy, and well, I can tell you my creativity will be quite low, and I will, which I've always been told by people that I have I'm very creative, which was always a lot of fun, right? Because to be creative and come up with creative solutions, it's an extremely fun process. But if you try
yeah,
to do that process with your mind only, it, you're really underutilizing a lot of capacities and skills that you have
yeah.
down inside you. And as you say, I will not be able to explain it to you or to anyone, because it's probably different for everybody,
It is.
and
Yeah,
it can't always be explained. But it's I think it's extremely important, and we can definitely dive into more detail. But I think it's important to mention it just in a general way, like this. Yeah.
yeah. I 100% agree, and it's something I always want to keep in mind, that the intuition or the gut feeling, whatever you want to call it, there's or the subconscious is. Then if it's the subconscious, then it's still in your mind, but it's not like present. It is just somewhere you cannot really grasp it, but it's still there, and you can really feel if something is off or not. And you're right, if you try to um, create something great or something fulfilling when it comes to purpose, you cannot just bite yourself into it and try to make it happen if you're not burning for it. It's so much harder. I think if you're not burning for something, you're quickly burn out.
Yeah, that's a nice way of putting it. And seen quite a few very good, also scientific researchers who speak about this. And
Mm,
I mean, there's lots of evidence that we are hugely underestimating our subconscious mind, right?
yeah,
So thinking of something, letting it rest for a day, for a week, what happens in sleep, right, and all that, and then thinking about it again. I've done this. I've applied this technique so much. I'm applying it every day at work, basically, where I have a problem. It looks like I just can't grasp it, but let me look at it. Let me think about it for a little bit. Okay, and then I'll look at it again next week or
yeah,
it depends on the urgency, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
I swear, it's the next time you look at it. Oh, it's so simple, and you do it,
yeah,
and that's the power of our subconscious mind. And the same counts for the intuition and the gut feeling, because in the end, and that's again something that I've learned from researchers who studied that more closely. Quite often, that's linked to it brings together a huge collection of experiences and things we've seen in the past that is impossible to have it top of mind because our brain will explode. We don't have. I mean, there are maybe some geniuses that can bring to their mind like hundreds of thousands of experiences at a time, but
yeah,
a regular human being, of course, can't rationally. But intuitively and gut feeling wise, you bring this experience to the moment, and not listening to that, you are really leaving out a lot. You're leaving, yeah, a lot of skills out that you have, and it's really underestimated. I really think we are in a very, very rational minded
yeah,
society, which
yeah,
is sometimes even looking down on using those, let's say, underestimated skills, which is a shame. And if you
yeah.
can start doing it today, and you will perform better. I'm really convinced of that.
Yeah. Do you mind sharing where you got these from? Maybe later you could send me some links
Yeah,
to
I
some
can look it
PDFs or
up.
something.
Yeah.
And do you have any like recommendations for reading? So I read. I try to read more, but I read a lot, and I think that always also like a mindset shift. Sometimes it's just a phrase that really changes your worldview. Do you have any book recommendations or anything else like that?
Yeah, yeah, nice. I do definitely. I would recommend a few classics like Yuval Noah Harari is. If you haven't read 21 Lessons for the 21st Century or Sapiens, I think it's just great. It's such extremely beautifully written books that you get basically a whole high school, like primary school education again, of all the things that you have forgotten, of all the things that you didn't know yet,
Yeah,
and so much inspiration from it. So huge recommendation if you haven't read those. Um, if you are listening to this and you're thinking, I'm triggered, but I haven't, in a good way, but I haven't, I don't have experience with, listening to myself beyond my rational mind and all that.
hmm,
In general, it really helps to, always have a book at home that is around awareness and consciousness. So whether it's the power of now, or whether it's Marc Aurel or something else, but having those, it's so powerful to just, and if it's just one page a day or at least once a week or so,
yeah,
it really triggers things in your brain, and it gives you ideas for just how to live better in a more balanced way. And how I like to do it as well is, whenever I feel stressed or I feel out of balance, the remedy can be like meditation and other things, and there are all kinds of ways to treat it. But
yeah,
a very simple way to do it is just start reading a little bit about consciousness and awareness in one of these books, like the ones I recommended. There are so many other good ones, and it really kind of resets you, and you're like, ah, yes, of course, it's like,
Yeah,
it's not rocket science in the end, but
it's always
that really
it's
helps.
yeah, you're so
Yeah.
right. It's when these kind of books, the knowledge is not something new, it's something that you almost forgot. It's just
Yeah.
like, yeah, it's like these put your palm onto your head and say, yeah,
Yes.
it could be so
Yeah,
simple.
exactly.
It's
Yeah.
really, I mean, if you were reading about a bit about rocket science, that is probably really new information to you. But most of books that really get around self-help or even anything philosophy, mostly if it's practical, like the Stoics, like Marco Aurelius, these are
Yeah.
like timeless wisdoms that are so deeply inside us, but are forgotten in our everyday lives, in our business lives, in our roads, whatever we're doing. But thank you so much for the recommendations, and overall, thank you so much for taking the time. And I hope we can see us soon.
Yeah, it would be great. It would be
Yep.
great to have a follow up. I think that's also the what we discussed, right? Like the same with thoughts counts for conversations.
Yeah.
Every conversation builds on another, and so definitely up for an for follow up at some point. Thank you, Emil.
Yeah. The next follow up could be in German if you prefer.
For example, yeah.
All right.
All right.
Thank you. See ya.
Yeah. Have a good one. Bye bye.